Hello and welcome to the Business English Podcast. I'm Rob and I'm thrilled you're tuning in today. In this episode, we'll be exploring language for mentoring and coaching in the workplace. Those crucial phrases you can use to guide, encourage, correct, and challenge mentees in a supportive way. Now, if you've ever found yourself struggling to give feedback without sounding overly critical or how to motivate someone who's losing confidence, this is definitely the episode for you. Before we jump into the how, let me tell you a quick story about our protagonist, Charlie. Charlie moved to London from Spain a couple of years ago. He works in a busy marketing firm where team collaboration is everything. Recently, his boss asked him to mentor a new intern. It sounded straightforward, right? Well, Charlie soon realized that every time he tried to offer some advice, he either came across as too direct, borderline rude, or so polite that his actual recommendations got lost in all the niceties. Frustrated, Charlie started avoiding these one-on-one sessions, worried he might say the wrong thing. But here's the twist. Not giving feedback can be just as harmful as giving it poorly. His intern wasn't improving at the pace anyone expected, and Charlie felt more stressed than ever. Now, does this sound a little familiar? Maybe you've been in Charlie's position yourself, unsure of how to phrase your thoughts, so they strike the perfect balance between friendly and firm. Or perhaps you're about to coach someone new and you want to avoid misunderstandings right from the start. Whichever camp you fall into, stick around because we'll be dissecting the exact language you need to make your mentoring moments count. I've got some exciting tips and real-world examples to share with you. Plus, in a few minutes, I'll reveal a simple technique that can turn even the toughest feedback into something productive and positive. If you've ever wondered how to cushion your corrections while still making your point clear, you won't want to miss it. Here's why this skill matters. In multicultural workplaces, language barriers and cultural differences can lead to confusion, tension, and missed opportunities. But when you know how to offer guidance respectfully, you become more than just a co-worker. You become a trusted mentor. Not only can you help your colleagues grow, but you can also sharpen your own leadership skills along the way. So what exactly are these key phrases that help you strike that perfect tone? How do you encourage someone without sugarcoating reality? And what if your mentee makes the same mistake over and over again? How do you correct them without crushing their motivation? We'll be answering all these questions and more in just a moment. Let's dive in and unpack why mentoring and coaching language is such a game changer in business English. And of course, we'll take a closer look at how you can apply these tips to your own conversations. By the end of this episode, you'll have a full toolkit of practical expressions and strategies, plus you'll discover how to avoid those common pitfalls that could hold you back. Ready to master the language of coaching? Let's get started. Now that we've set the stage, let's dive into why mentoring and coaching language matters so much in today's global workplace. Because let's face it, if you're spending time and energy guiding someone, you want it to actually make an impact. Think about the last time you tried to give someone a piece of advice. Maybe you had the best intentions, but your words got jumbled, or you ended up sounding less confident than you felt. Or maybe you were so focused on being polite that your real message never came through. Does this ring a bell? Let's make sure that never happens again. First off, mentoring and coaching language is crucial because it creates clarity. Without the right words, feedback can feel vague, confusing, or even confrontational, especially if you're working in a multicultural environment where English isn't everyone's first language. When you choose precise, respectful phrases, you help the other person understand exactly what's expected, which means fewer misunderstandings and more productive outcomes. Excellent. Second, it builds trust. When your mentee or colleague senses that you're being honest but supportive, they're far more likely to open up, ask questions, and experiment with new ideas, which is great in a team environment. Trust is the engine that drives any successful mentoring relationship, and the language you use can either fuel that engine or stall it. Now, what does that look like in real life? Let me give you a couple of quick use cases. Scenario 1. Offering constructive criticism. Let's say your mentee is consistently submitting reports with minor errors. You could say, "Your work is full of mistakes, you need to fix this." But that might discourage them. Instead, imagine saying, "I really appreciate the effort you put in. Let's take a closer look at these small details to make sure everything's accurate." See how that tone shifts from accusation to collaboration. Scenario 2. Motivating a junior colleague. Your colleague is feeling overwhelmed and they're starting to doubt themselves. A phrase like, "I believe you're capable of more than you realize. Let's figure out how to highlight your strengths," can turn self-doubt into renewed enthusiasm. Scenario 3. Guiding someone to take on new challenges. Sometimes people just need a nudge to step out of their comfort zone. Telling them, "You've shown real skill in managing these tasks. How about taking on a larger project next quarter?" This not only recognizes their current abilities, but also encourages them to keep growing. Scenario 4. Handling sensitive feedback in cross-cultural settings. Maybe you're coaching someone from a different background. The risk of causing offense can be high if your words aren't carefully chosen. Gentle softeners like might, could, and perhaps can help you sound supportive rather than critical. For instance, perhaps we can refine this by focusing on the main objectives first. This sounds more like a collaboration than a "we need to fix this now." But here's the real kicker. Mastering this kind of language doesn't just help your mentee, it helps you become a more effective leader. When you deliver feedback that's both clear and considerate, you gain respect. People start to see you as someone who's empathetic, but also knows how to get results. And that reputation can open doors to bigger leadership roles or projects down the line. Still not convinced? Stay tuned because in a few moments we'll be talking about exactly how to structure these phrases so you can adopt them in your daily conversations. Plus, I'll share a key framework that takes the guesswork out of giving balanced feedback, no matter what challenge you're tackling. Trust me, once you've learned it, you'll never go back to those awkward, rambling conversations again. Ready to dive deeper into the nuts and bolts of forming these powerful coaching expressions? Well, let's keep going. It's time to roll up our sleeves and look at exactly how to use language effectively when mentoring or coaching someone at work. But before we dive into those key phrases, I want to offer you a quick invitation. If you'd like more powerful professional resources and even a transcript of today's episode, sign up for our weekly newsletter, the 3-Minute Minutes. Or if you're ready for a faster, deeper upgrade, check out the Business English Podcast premium subscription for exclusive content and advanced lessons. Links are in the show notes. All right, let's get into it. We'll start with some simple structures and then I'll share phrases you can use to guide, encourage, correct, and challenge your mentee in a supportive way. After I introduce each phrase, I'll give you a second to repeat it, and then we'll explore how and why you might use it. Ready? Let's go. Guiding or suggesting improvements. Phrase 1. Have you considered? A scenario here might be when you notice your mentee is stuck using the same marketing approach and you want to open up a new strategy without sounding bossy. The phrase "have you considered" is polite and indirect. It invites the mentee to explore possibilities rather than telling them what to do. Using the present perfect tense, have you considered, implies you're asking about their experience or thoughts up until now. Phrase 2. It might be helpful to. It might be helpful to. A good scenario for this one could be when a colleague is overwhelmed by data analysis and you want to suggest a different tool or technique to simplify the process. The word might is a softener, as we touched on before, making your suggestion less imposing and more collaborative. This is especially useful in cross-cultural settings to maintain a respectful tone. Phrase 3. Another approach you could try is. A scenario for this could be your mentee has a presentation tomorrow and you have a fresh idea for visual aids they haven't used before. Another approach suggests there is more than one valid way to do something, which keeps the conversation open and positive. You could try also shows flexibility, giving the mentee a choice in how they proceed. Now let's talk about some phrases for encouraging and motivating. Phrase 1. I really appreciate how you. This could be when your mentee has stayed late to finish a crucial report and you want them to know their efforts don't go unnoticed. I really appreciate is a strong acknowledgement of the person's effort. It focuses on the positive action rather than just saying thank you, which can sometimes feel a little bit too generic. Phrase 2. You're making great progress on. A scenario for this one could be that your mentee has been practicing their public speaking skills and you notice they're more confident this week. By specifying what they're doing well, like public speaking, time management, or teamwork, you offer targeted praise. This helps your mentee understand exactly what success looks like. Phrase 3. I believe you can go further by. A good use case for this one could be when you see real potential in your mentee and want to stretch their abilities with a new challenge, maybe leading a small project. Including I believe shows confidence in their capabilities. Pairing it with a clear suggestion, in this case the use of the word by, gives them a direct path to excel even further. Okay, let's look at some phrases now to do with correcting and challenging diplomatically. Phrase 1. Perhaps we can refine this by. A good use case for this one would be when your mentee wrote a draft proposal that's decent but needs more concrete data. The word refine instead of fix or correct sounds more collaborative, perhaps also softens the statement, making it feel like a team effort rather than criticism. Phrase 2. I noticed that you might need to. A good example here could be when your mentee has been struggling with scheduling conflicts but hasn't realised they're overcommitting. I noticed is a gentle opener that expresses observation rather than judgment. The phrase you might need to suggests a possible solution rather than an order. Phrase 3. Let's see how we can adjust this part to. A scenario here could be when your mentee's marketing plan is on track except for one segment that isn't quite hitting the target audience. Using let's see how we can adjust keeps it inclusive. We are working together, side by side, to find a better approach. Okay, finally, let's look at two phrases that help with summarizing the next steps. Phrase 1. So our main focus moving forward is. An example scenario here could be after a productive mentoring session, you want to pinpoint the key takeaway. Moving forward signals a forward-looking approach, which is key to progress. It sums up the conversation and aligns everyone on the next goal. Phrase 2. Let's plan the next steps to. Let's plan the next steps to. A good scenario here could be you and your mentee have decided on action items and now it's time to detail them. Including let's, again, brings a sense of collaboration. It implies shared responsibility and motivates your mentee to stay committed to the plan. Okay, great work with the phrases. Keep practicing them out loud and even recording yourself if you feel like it, so they become second nature. In a few moments, we'll discuss common pitfalls when using these phrases and how to avoid sounding too blunt or too vague. You won't want to miss that because even small tweaks to your language can make such a huge difference in how your message is received. Stay with me, we're almost there. Next, let's talk about what not to do, and I'll share some quick tips to help you get the absolute best out of these expressions. It's time to explore some of the most common errors professionals make when applying these mentoring and coaching phrases. Stick with me because in just a moment, I'll also share some power tips that can instantly level up the impact of your feedback. Let's start with a classic pitfall. We mention it a lot on the podcast, and it is, of course, overusing the word sorry. If you keep apologizing before offering advice, sorry, but maybe you should try, you risk weakening your message. Sure, being polite is essential, but too many apologies can come across as a lack of confidence. Instead, use a direct yet friendly tone. This small shift might feel unfamiliar at first, but makes a huge difference in how seriously people take your suggestions. Another biggie, being overly direct or blunt. In some work cultures, like many in Northern Europe, being very direct is acceptable, even appreciated. But in others, particularly in East Asia or parts of Latin America, phrases that are too direct can be interpreted as rude. This is where softeners come in handy. Words like could, might, or perhaps help you maintain a balance between clarity and respect. Try sprinkling these in your feedback to avoid ruffling any feathers inadvertently. Then there's the opposite problem, quite literally, using vague language. If you only say, "You're doing fine," or "That's interesting," your mentee gains zero actionable insights. Instead, point to specific details like data analysis, communication style, or even project timelines, so your feedback feels more concrete. Saying you're doing great with stakeholder presentations, especially in breaking down complex ideas, tells your mentee exactly what they're doing right and encourages them to build on that skill. On the grammatical side, one common error is mixing up verb tenses or failing to use modals correctly. For example, you must consider changing your approach. This may sound too forceful in a mentoring scenario. Swap must for might or could to suggest an idea without issuing it as a sort of command. You could consider changing your approach. This subtle shift makes you sound supportive rather than strict. Let's also talk about cultural nuances. Some listeners might come from a culture where you wait your turn to speak only when invited. Others might come from a fast-paced, interrupt-friendly culture. Either way, if you're mentoring across cultures, be mindful of pacing. Take a moment to clarify. How do you prefer to receive feedback? This one question can prevent a lot of miscommunication down the line. And one more to watch out for: filler words and hedging. Phrases like like, or you know can make your feedback sound unprepared or uncertain. It's okay to use them occasionally, after all, we are human, but too many dilutes your message. Try taking a short pause instead. Pauses can actually draw attention to what you say next, making your feedback land more powerfully. So, how do you dodge these pitfalls? Well, practice is key. Record yourself giving a mock feedback session. Listen back and note where you might be too apologetic, too blunt, or too vague. Another tip: read more business articles or watch videos to pick up natural sounding phrases. And of course, pay attention to how your co-workers respond. If they're nodding along and asking follow-up questions, that's a good sign you're on the right track. Keep all of this in mind the next time you help a colleague fine-tune their presentation or guide a new hire through a tricky project. In just a moment, we'll wrap up with a quick recap and some final thoughts on how to weave these tips into your daily workflow. Trust me, you won't want to miss the final piece of this puzzle. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of the Business English Podcast. We've covered a lot, from key mentoring and coaching phrases to common pitfalls and how to avoid them. But before we wrap up, let me leave you with one final tip. When giving feedback, always think about the balance between clarity and tone. A great way to check this? Record yourself. Next time you're preparing to give feedback, try saying it out loud first. Does it sound natural? Does it strike the right tone? Are you being too direct or too vague? A quick self-check like this can make all the difference in how your message is received. Now, if you found this episode helpful, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a colleague or friend or anyone who could use a boost in their professional English skills. And if you want to keep improving fast, don't forget to subscribe to the 3-Minute Minutes, our free weekly newsletter packed with practical business English tips and even a full transcript of today's episode. Or if you're ready for a faster, deeper upgrades, check out the Business English Podcast Premium subscription for exclusive content and lessons. The links are in the show notes. And just a quick note, if you are on LinkedIn, come and say hi. I'd love to hear how you're applying these techniques in your workplace. That's it for today. Thanks for listening, and remember, the right words don't just help you speak better, they help you lead better. So, stay sharp, keep practicing, and of course, keep it strictly business.